Appreciate you standing by to this frequency for the program International Forum. I am Wilson Marshall. Today, it's all about what has happened and what is going to be having a long-lasting impact. Depends on the way it's been handled in the Middle East. Talking about Israel and, of course, the Arab nation. For the first time in 25 years, Israeli plane touched down. Yeah, the UAE. And it sparked an uproar. But they didn't just touch down. They went ahead to sign an accord known as the Abraham Accord, where a relationship would have fostered between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Many persons have been talking about this, the impact, the effect this accord will have. We'll talk about the pursuit of peace in the Middle East. And one man is saying that he's the one behind it all, but he just can't deny because he was there. The United States President Donald Trump is going to add a feather to his cap. We'll talk about the U.S. election that is fast approaching come November 16, if I'm not mistaken. With me here in the studio to talk about this, I have two vibrant youths. Let me welcome a legal practitioner, a political analyst. We'll talk about international affairs. He's so vast in it. Join me, welcome Osazuwa Osahon. Welcome to International Forum.
It is always my pleasure being here.
Right. And so very close to him is a vibrant youth, a political analyst. Join me to welcome Alex Obi. Alex, welcome to International Forum.
Thank you very much.
All right. So, Osazuwa, this is not the first time that Trump has done something tangible when you talk about Israeli relations with the Middle East. Yes, he raised dust by moving the capital of Jerusalem, of Israel, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. There were massive protests here. And according to report also, he was somehow directly or indirectly involved in Bahrain and UAE coming together with Israel to sign what is known as the Abraham Accord. I mean, with this accord right now on the ground, what do you think would be the peace or peaceful disposition in this region?
Yes, thank you very much. I've always said, quoting John F. Kennedy, that there is no such thing as a bad peace or a good war. Yeah. That is to say, any step we take towards peace, any movement we take towards the actualization of harmony, of brotherhood, of lesser gunshots, and more cooperation, I'm always aiming for it. Not to belittle what Trump has achieved now, but I will also quickly say that yes, what we have today is a kind of a roadmap to peace, a normalization of relationship between Israel on one hand and Bahrain, then Israel and then the United Arab Emirates. That's what we have now. It's a process. It is not yet uhuru, as it is said. They are yet to establish embassies and exchange ambassadors and other things. Those one will come if the will is there. But of course, there is a pointer. Why? You talk about this peace deal. But there has never been a war between Israel and the United Arab Emirates or between Israel and Bahrain. There has never been a war. But there is this tension that has grown, being part of the Arab League itself. But the Arab League has taken a staunch position on the Palestinian question. Now, we have to go back to that Palestinian question. Are the root cause of the Arab-Israeli conflict been attended to, or even pretended to be attended to in this peace deal? It is no. Like Dr. King said, that good neighborliness, or philanthropy, as he said, is more than flipping a coin to a beggar. That it must ultimately come to see that an edifice that keeps producing beggars needs to be reconstructed. You have to go to the roots of things to address it. If you want lasting peace, the Palestinian questions must be answered. We are having fantastic deals that Jared Kushner is seeing is the deal of the century. What is the place of the Palestine in it?
We'll come to that.
What is the take? What are the Palestinians involved in this process? The answer, my brother, is sadly no.
All right, we'll come to the Palestinian question right now. Now, it was really named the deal of the century, which you rightly said, because nobody saw it coming in a way. People are thinking that this may not be possible because of Donald Trump. His influence, so to speak, one way or the other, had something to do with it. Now, do you think this is like a step in the right direction when we talk about the pursuit of peace in that zone. From what Barrister Sahon talked about, he said nothing like bad peace or good war. At least, I think it's a step forward in that regard.
Definitely, there's really nothing like a bad peace or a good war. But, you know, peace goes beyond mere signing of treaties and handshake, you know. And I also stand on the point that there can't really be true peace without the presence of justice. Peace is not just the absence of war, but it's the presence of justice. Then again, I don't really envy the position of the main actors in that deal. I can understand the extenuable circumstances that they have found themselves in. And like we said, we always say that the devil is in the details. So I think in trying to start the process towards peace and stability in the Middle East, part of what they did was to try to play down a little the Palestinian issue in order not to affect the bigger picture. Because, you know, when you want to start a process like that, the two-state solution or the self-determination goal or objective of the Palestinian people, bringing such a delicate matter into the so-called normalization deal would have complicated it, and at the end of the day, it will have been, where do we go from here? So I think it's a step in the right direction. But beyond that, I see that people, most members of the Arab League in the Middle East are growing a little bit weary and tired about the Palestinian issue. And again, countries more and more are putting their personal interest above, you know, the general interest. And ultimately, this deal was very important because of the increased aggression of Iran. And so they know that, like they say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, of course, because of Israel's stance against Iran and Israel's level in terms of technology and its advancement, it only makes sense that a country like UAE, that is very modern and has a lot of dreams and goals, would want to partner with that kind of country within the Middle East. So, UAE and Bahrain agreeing to this deal has a lot of their own personal benefit, of course, which is expected because it's all about interest.
All right, now from your own point of view, do you think that this is all about a personal interest other than a brotherly interest that the Middle East are known for? It's like, you know, all for one, one for all. With this deal right now with Bahrain and, of course, UAE with Israel, is it going to crack that relationship?
Thank you very much again. I couldn't agree more with my fellow discussant today, talking about interest. If you look at this whole process, if you look at this whole deal, there are three key factors, three fundamentals, three baseline, substratum, as we say, the foundation.
Yeah.
One of them is the Trump factor.
The Trump factor?
Yes, that's the first one. Trump wants to present something as his foreign policy achievement, that I got this deal done. So he's railroading everybody, just trying to build a house. It's a front, it's a facade. There is no substance, there is no depth. We did something. But I'm okay with that, like I said. No matter the step, any step you take towards peace, I'm okay for it. But then we must also understand, he just wants something that, look, I made something happen. We had a deal, or a kind of deal. Even if you take a critical look at the so-called peace deal or normalization process, you will find there is really nothing. Since the early 2000s, Bahrain and the UAE has been dealing with Israel subterraneously, because the people there, they don't want their own people to know. These are monarchies which the average Emirati or the average Bahraini, they don't like what is happening to the Palestinians. They don't like, they see Israel dominance as kind of apartheid. That's the average man on the street. But we have an oligarch, we have the leaders, we have the ruling class. Those people, those people could be railroaded, they could be manipulated, and Trump has succeeded in manipulating them, cornering them into his corner, which of course is politics, cornering people into your corner. He has been able to get results by so doing. That's one factor. Then the second factor is the factor of greed. It is the factor of they are not genuflecting, so to speak, before the God of capitalism, before the God of money, before the God of industrialization and the God of they are forgetting their own religious, their own moral, and their own philosophical background. They are sick and they are tired, like my colleague said, of hearing. They know the Palestinian question is there. It's not a question that cannot be answered. If you look at it critically, it's almost a deed that can never ever be done. But we keep putting this one forward. We keep pushing the doomsday backward a bit, hoping that something miraculous will happen. We know that for Israel, Jerusalem will always remain the eternal and indivisible capital. That Israel will never, the time will never come, my brother, when Israel stands to where Jerusalem will change.
All right.
And the time will also never come when the Arabs stand that East Jerusalem is the capital, is the future capital of Palestine. They will never change their mind about that. So we know this, but in the meantime, we keep playing around it. All right. We keep trying to make a deal. Let me tell you about I said three factors. One, Trump.
Greed.
Yes, greed.
And the third one.
And the third one.
Let me just give you time to think about the third one. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay. Well, I like the picture to show us where Trump and of course a representative of the UAE and of course Bahrain were signing that deal. They call it the deal of the century. Really, if you take a look at it from one angle, it may really suit that title, the deal of the century, where Trump and Rice sat down and they were signing. PD, thank you for doing that. Now, he talked about greed. He talked about the Trump factor.
If I may add the third one, before you can get to it. Okay. Yes, now, he also mentioned the third one, which is the Iranian factor.
Okay.
The Iranian factor is a key substantium again. Right. Like he said, the enemy of your enemy becoming your friend.
Your friend.
There is a narrative going on now in the Middle East, in the Arab country, that look, it is very, if you read Aliman.
Yeah, Animal Kingdom.
If you read Animal Kingdom by George Orwell, you understand what is happening today. The things that have changed. The enemy is not Israel. The streets of Dubai, go to somewhere Kuwait. Because of so much money, so much wealth, the enemy has changed from being Israel. Okay. The enemy has become Iran. Let me tell you what's happening. Because they needed to scapegoat somebody for their shift. This is a fundamental shift for them. They want to place it, so it's a shift that doesn't and will never make sense. But then, we have Iran now. Iran has been demonized. Iran needed to be demonized for there to be peace in the Middle East.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Okay, you just come back. Now, he mentioned three factors. The Trump factor, the greed factor, and of course, the one you rightly mentioned, the Iranian factor. Now, putting these factors together, can they really stand the test of time for this accord to last with time, knowing fully well that the Palestinian question is still very much on the ground?
Like I said, the 24 hours is a very long time, both in politics and even in international affairs. It depends. It depends if Trump is reelected. It depends. Now, what we are expecting, to be frank, this is not the first time Arab nations are actually signing a peace treaty. Egypt, since 1979, Egypt under Nasser did it. In 1994, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan did something similar to this as well. So this is not the first time. So we are expecting that other nations will join in the very close future. So it depends again on Trump getting re-elected. Of course, we understand that there is no how the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain would agree to such a deal without at least the permission of Saudi Arabia. But we expect that Saudi Arabia is not going to rush into this, because them taking a stand to be far more delicate than the UAE and the Bahrain. So this deal has the express permission of major players in the Middle East. Major players in the Middle East. And, you know, times have changed. You are having younger people in power, people who were trained abroad, people who their outlook at the world is a little bit different than their daddies and their fathers who were kings in the past. You know, people who have swallowed this whole glamour of globalization and meeting up with the world and they are ready to, you see the reforms that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has been performing in recent times. So things are going to change. How the implementation of the only that come up within this is not the whole of shape the policy.
Thank you so much for staying tuned. If you just joined us, this is International Forum. What you saw is what you're expecting to see come October 1 on Thursday. Yeah, independence of where Nigeria now. Well, it's all about the Abraham Accord, what is happening between Israel, UAE, and Bahrain. Now, some conditions were given to Israel. Do not expand your territories. Do you see Israel fulfilling one of those conditions given to it for the Accord to take effect smoothly?
Thank you for this question. It's very apt. Let me give an example. In 1979, when Anwar Sadat, and then Anwar Sadat was then president of Egypt, and the prime minister of Israel was Menachem Begin, when they signed that Camp David Accord, bringing peace between Israel and Egypt, Egypt and Israel were technically at war. They have fought for years. And that agreement was what settled the issue of the Suez Canal, the issue of the passing, what they call this passing into Palestine today, and so many things that were settled, and also the territories that Israel took, boundaries were adjusted.
Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, and the rest of them.
And in 1994, when they had this deal with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, he also settled to a very large extent the issue of the West Bank. And then the return of the refugees and other things. And by then, Jordan, of course, in collaboration with Syria, they took part in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when Israel was almost overrun. So that was the point, was that it caused them something. Boundaries were adjusted and things happened. But what do we have in this 2020 peace and so-called peace normalization? Nothing. To answer you, Israel has not even committed to halting the expansion and the building of Jewish settlement in the West Bank. They didn't even commit. It is not even in the deal. The so-called deal of the century. The only thing they could have taken from, the only concession Israel could have given to them was to say, I will stop building. They just altered that, and they reserved the right to continue building at any time. They didn't commit to stopping the expansion in Palestinian land. So you ask me, what is, apart from propping up the ego of Donald J. Trump, there's nothing the Arab got from this deal, which is the truth, my brother.
All right, I'll come to you now. He said there's nothing the Arab got from this deal because there was a suspension of the expansion of Israeli territories in the area of dispute.
Well, the name is very clear. It's a normalization deal. It means we are making formal the deals that has been going on at the background. So what's a normalization deal? I know the name sounds funny when they say peace treaty. Yeah. It means that we can resume diplomatic ties. So that other, trade, tourism, and all that. So I think the name itself does not in any way say, talk about something that is very serious. It's saying that, yes, we can resume our diplomatic ties with our both embassies, with exchange ambassadors. We can also do some other things officially. So the name already states that it's not something really out of, so it's just what it is.
So you're saying Israel stand alone to gain and the Arab League that took part in this, they have nothing to gain? Is that what you're saying right now?
No, not necessarily.
Because what he said they have almost nothing to gain.
No.
He compared it to the deal that took place between Egypt and Israel.
When you say the Arab, is it the Arab League or the individual nations?
Individual nations.
United Arab
and the Arab League.
United Arab Emirates has a lot to gain from exchanging technology. Israel is one of the most advanced technological states in the Middle East. They have a lot to gain because of military cooperation. With this deal now with Israel, the UAE can demand for some certain kind of weapons from the US. Because the US now is going to be looking at Bahrain and UAE with in a different light now. Like, oh, friend of Israel, allow them to have these weapons. In that sense. But the point we're trying to make is that we don't know how this is going to help the Palestinian case. But if it's for the individual states and the constant threat of Iran. Now, let me explain this threat of Iran. It's not just, the threat of Iran is not just the threat of a surprise attack from Iran. It's also the growing popularity of the Shiite Muslim division, even in these individual countries. Because when Ayatollah came in as the leader in Iran in 1979, he started to export this Islamic revolution to various countries, supporting dissidents, Shiites, Hezbollah, and all that. So in that sense, they did it for their own security, they did it for their own future, they did it for their own economic benefits, and they also, at the level of the oligarchs, the monarch, they did it to have a better control. Because I probably was reading today, and I saw that Israel was selling spy gadgets, you know, so that they can use to monitor effectively their citizens.
Okay.
To strengthen their hold even on power.
All right, now,
in their various countries.
As against the point you raised, say they have so much to gain from this, and of course the Iranian question, it is going to silence Iran or to make them more dangerous.
Thank you again. You see, one of the biggest ironies of U.S. Middle East foreign policy is Iran. Iran deflects immediately back to the U.S. the white man, what I've always called the hypocrisy of Western democracies. I have not seen some people so much adept at perpetuating their hegemony. We look at them, we always look at them as the good guys. There's nothing further than the truth. Let me tell you something. Is it not ironious that the only democracy in the Middle East has not been demonized, which is Iran? Why the oligarchs, why the monarchies that are not accountable to people, the U.S., which calls itself a democracy, keep propping them up? It's a process. And let me also shock you. Do you know that this very same Iran, was the first country in the Persian Gulf to recognize the state of Israel? Is that not shocking? The very same Iran that now become the face of the devil today because of Western propaganda. No, that is the truth. That is the truth. Because it is what suits the Western imperialists, what is good for them. That's the brand, that's what you will see. That's what I will see. Today now, Iran has to be demonized because they want to silence the Palestinian people. So that you should know there's a bigger threat now. We can close our eyes to the suffering of the Palestinians if these guys can help us come and curtail Iran. Iran has now become a devil. Iran that was just doing its own. Haven't signed the non-proliferation treaty with the...
Doing his own by threatening Israel to wipe out Israel.
That was there. What they signed with the United States, they signed with the European Union, they signed with Germany, they signed with Russia, and all the power blocks in the world. And we had there into it. It was said that there was no infraction. But no, something has to be set in motion because it's a process that somebody Trump wanted to start so that he can be able to get to where he wants to go. So he has to demonize Iran. He has to bring certain things to bear so that he can do his thing. So that is the truth. We must understand what is happening today. That look, the Palestinian question, I'm not being pessimistic, the Palestinian question cannot be solved. There's no way forward. And Trump has to be seen to be doing something about it. And that's this we have today.
All right. Okay, now though we don't have much, I would have gone in depth into all this stand of Iran and all that. But I'll take a look at the US election. With this deal of the century, is it going to give Trump a kind of a leeway to that over office once more? Briefly, our time is up.
The Republican Party, a major part of the Republican supporters and in the US supporters is the Christian evangelicals and those who are deeply in support of Israel, those who have this orientation that Israel uniting with the Arab world would probably signal the coming of Jesus. So that's major bloc would surely rejoice in this kind of thing. But in the past, we have seen cases where American presidents succeeded outside, like in the Gulf War, that Bush won, only to lose at home. So it's very dicey.
Well, thank you so much. You don't delve into religion, but we don't have enough time to go into that. Peace in the Middle East, coming of the Lord Jesus and the rest of that. Well, viewers, this is where we draw curtains on today's edition of International Forum. Gentlemen, I appreciate your wonderful analysis. See you next week, Tuesday, God willing. Bye for now.